the journey from Pesach until Shavuos every year is the journey from being Avdei Paro to Ovdei Hashem. And this was Klal Yisrael's journey in the Midbar for those 7 weeks. They were weeks of anticipation and preparation to become Yam Hashem. And every year we relive or we're supposed to relive, V'chayev Adam Liras Atzasmo Kilahu Yosam Mitzrayim. And we are supposed to count every day until we arrive ready to receive Kabbalah Satorah Ki'ish Echad B'Lev Echad. Now the mitzvah of Zechiras Yetzias Mitzrayim, the mitzvah proper, we have the mitzvah proper of remembering, but it's also many mitzvos. In the context of many mitzvos, we're reminded Zechir Yetzias Mitzrayim. Rav Hirsch counts 24 times that this happens in the Torah. And he explains that the reason why there's this emphasis on remembering is because often the context is in respecting other people's physical bodies and financial concerns and treating them with sensitivity. And he explains that the Jewish consciousness has to remember our humble beginnings, that we were once avadim, we were once gerim, we were foreigners in the land, we had no rights. And this should propel us to respect other people and treat other people as equals and dignified. In fact, the Torah says in 2 places, it's not Zecher L'tzias Mitzrayim in this case, it's remembering that you were an Eved. Remember what it was like to be an Eved. Remember how, when every man and woman was without rights, you treated each other with selflessness. Remember the Shotrim in Mitzrayim, who accepted the beatings instead of demanding the impossible quotas on the Jewish people and beating them. Recall the attitude of all for one and one for all that grows in an atmosphere of oppression among the oppressed. This is the attitude of all for one and one for all, and I've got your back, that led the Jews to be Ki'ish Echad B'Lev Echad. And this is the attitude that is supposed to permeate our camps for eternity. Now, if there was some aspect of character development that was enhanced by our slavery experience, which is why we're instructed to remember over and over again, make sure you don't trample on other people's rights, because remember, you too were an Eved. So the fact that there's some positive aspect of character development that is a result of our avdus also tells us that there's a corresponding risk of mistreating other people when we have our freedom. And this is so. When we become masters of our time, of our bodies and our possessions, we become vulnerable to thinking that we're masters over others too. And this newfound freedom leads to hoarding in a different context than we're accustomed to these past few weeks. Hoarding, power struggle, relentless drive to acquire wealth, even at the expense of others. So Sfira begins the day on the day that we celebrate our newfound freedom. But in order to take into account the vulnerability that we have as free people, we count the Sfira, and it's permeated with this V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, the whole, no lo nohagu zeh b'zeh, which that's why we have a veilus during the Sfira, because we failed in this regard. But the pathway to get from Avdei Paro to Ovdei Hashem is making sure we don't lose that. When we are free people and we're not being oppressed, we're at risk of losing our sense of brotherhood, the sense of I'm in it with you and I've got your back. There's a story in the Gemara, in the Gemara Sanhedrin, and it's talking about the pasuk Sheker Achein Revel Yofi Isha Yiras Hashem Hitzis Halal. And it applies the different phrases in Eishes Chayil to different generations. And his highest praise of Isha Yiras Hashem Hitzis Halal describes the generation of Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai, where 6 people would cover themselves with 1 talis and learn Torah. Now this is often explained as it was a tchak, and they had, and even though they were so poor, they were learning Torah, and that was the great merit of that generation. But Reb Chaim Shmulevitz explains it differently. He says that 1 talis is never sufficient to cover 6 people. So if one person is covered, he's trying to make sure that he's covered. He's going to pull the blanket over himself. Or the talus over himself. He's not going to make sure. There's no possible way for 6 people to fit under one talus or blanket. Only in that generation of Rav Yehuda Bar Ilai, each one thought about the other. And if you have 6 people who are not each trying to grab the blanket, then it can work. So Chaim Shmulevitz says that was the great schus of that generation. So I think that the current situation in the world has kind of equalized things in some regard. Obviously, not every regard. There are some people who are, who are struggling with illness, and some people who have lost family members, and other people who are struggling financially. But there's a certain feeling of we're all in this together, a tremendous outpouring of chesed. And I think this is part of where our work is in Sfira, to make sure that we hold on to this, even when, God willing, this passes and is behind us, that we have the sense of brotherhood and we're all in this together, that we need for Ki'ish Echad B'Lev Echad to be Makabel Torah and Amitzvah Hashem to greet Mashiach.